On the 15th of November 2022, for the first time in human history, there were 8 billion of us here. Is this a good thing, or is humanity doomed? And if it is, what can we do? To understand if this is a good thing or not, we need to go back in time. Long ago, having more people around contributed towards security, as well as a lot more persons to handle the work. That is why cultures celebrated childbirth. In ancient Jewish times, a barren woman was someone who was looked down upon. In Rome, they passed laws to encourage marriage and childbirth, ensuring their armies as well as the land that they take. And probably the biggest reason of them all was the death rate. Your child had a 25% chance of dying in their first year of life, and only a 50% chance of making it till 20. Thus, the best way to secure your future was to make as many children as possible. This continued like this until about the 1800s. In 1804, we reached 1 billion people. Naturally, having that amount of people around started to concern some, like Thomas Malthus, a British economist and philosopher. Studying the matter, he came up with this formula. He used it to project population growth over time and came to the conclusion that if we don't get it under control, that soon we'll be riddled with disease, famine, and war. This was a very reasonable theory for the time. But there was one thing that Malthus couldn't predict. This is Alexander Fleming. The same year that we reached 2 billion people in 1928, Alexander came back to his unclean laboratory and found something amazing. He found a bacteria that refused to get close to mold. And as he tested it further, what he discovered was penicillin. And with that, our population went from this to this. This growth happened not because people were having more children, but because the children who were being born were staying alive. And those who were already here increased their lifespan. This sudden population explosion had its problems. One of which was, how do you feed so many people? And in 1959, when we reached 3 billion people, thoughts of doom was common. A crisis of humanity was here. The speculation came out that the earth could only hold 4 billion persons. Subsequently, multiple authors started to write different books on the topic, the most famous of which was The Population Bomb. This book predicted that we'd have been living in a dystopian future. And this was reinforced by the fact that the two biggest population centers, India and China, had a lot of persons who were starving. But just like Thomas Malthus, they could not foresee what was about to happen next. This is Norman Borlaug, a biologist who took his time to study wheat. In doing so, he engineered wheat that could have produced 4 times as the amount as before, as well as grow in a much harsher climate. He then took the wheat to India, and for the most part, the food problem was solved, to the point that India started to export grain. Even with this success story, it did not overturn the deep-rooted ideas that we were doomed. As a result, China enacted the one-child policy, so harshly implemented to the point that women had forced abortions. And in India, they started to sterilize women. How did history reach on this dark path? It is because they used this formula. It's used to calculate carrying capacity, or the amount of persons needed on Earth for its resources to last forever. This may have been fine if we lived in a perfect world, but the fact is the variables are always changing. Who could have foreseen that we'd have found medications to increase the lifespan, or bioengineered plants to produce more food? This is why 8 billion persons doesn't mean that humanity is doomed. In fact, we could add another billion persons and we may not even notice a difference. How? The reason why is because we currently produce enough food to feed 10 billion people. If that is true, why does 800 million people each year go hungry? Because food production is not the issue. More than 30% of the food that we produce is thrown away. The issue is, how do you store food to get it to those who need it? Once this problem is solved, hunger may as well disappear. Someone for sure is working on this problem, so we just need to wait and see. Okay, we may be able to feed a lot more people, but there is no possible way that amount will be good for the environment, right? Not necessarily. It depends on where you put them. For example, the average American produces 16 tons of CO2 each year. The average Canadian, 14 tons. But the average person who lives in India produces only 2 tons. The same so for those in Africa. And it's precisely in these countries where the majority of people will be added. By 2050, Africa will double its population, adding more than 1 billion persons. These added persons will not have much of an effect on the climate. The biggest effect will be those in developed countries. If doom and Armageddon is coming, it's not because of the amount of persons who are here on Earth, but because of how we choose to manage our resources. Now here's some good news. It's predicted by the year 2100 we'll taper off at 10.9 billion people. And then from there, it's a downward trend. That's because of this number, 2.1, the number that is needed to maintain a population. It is a replacement number. So in case you die, there's someone from the next generation to take your place. The reason why the population will decline is because the world replacement number looks like this. Developed countries will be the first to be hit with a population crash. This is actually a good thing, because that means that those in a less developed country will get a chance to lift themselves out of poverty. Every time we were faced with a calamity, we found ourselves through, either by accident or by intentional looking. I think whatever crisis is ahead, we will be able to face it. Thanks for watching.